Sorry,
So
a long, brief description.
yeah,
Sorry.
it was long, but like I can understand the feeling. I can understand that what was going on at that time, like when you just got divorced and everything was messed up.
We were happily married running up to sort of, not long before, I suppose, the COVID pandemic, probably a year or so before that. We've been married for about 8 years nearly, and I'd had some suspicion that something just wasn't quite right in the relationship.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome to our channel. And today I'm very happy because today we have Luke with us. And today we are going to talk about relationships. And it's a very we are going to deep dive into relationships and how you can start your business. And there are a lot of things that we are going to cover with Luke. So make sure to watch this podcast till the end. And Luke, how are you? How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure, and
Thank you so
I'm
much
glad
for
as well
being
that
here.
no, you're more than welcome. The weather has taken a slightly more positive turn now. It's been pretty miserable this last week or two. Summer has definitely ended, but it's there's been nice crisp winter mornings or autumn mornings, I suppose. So, all
Amazing,
good.
amazing. So how's your work going on? How's everything going on in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you have to wake up and recognize and really appreciate the things that you have in your life, regardless of what those things are. It's so easy to focus on things that detract us and bring us down, affect our moods. And then, of course, that creates sets of feelings and emotions that tend to lead to places that further perpetuate that cycle. So paying attention to the things that you do have, whether it is just getting out and having a walk in the morning and a bit of fresh air, or having that conversation with your friend or loved one, or seeing your kids play, or whatever it is, it's just really embracing that present moment, which is very relevant to how I've dealt with many challenges that I've faced in my life.
Amazing. And Luke, let us get started this podcast with your story because I want to know that how do you came to life coaching, relationship coaching? Because there are a lot of other careers that you can choose. There are a lot of other options that you have, but why life coaching? What was there in your life so that you drive to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I suppose my name is Luke Shillings. I'm a relationship and infidelity recovery coach. That's what I do as part of my day job, shall we say. And I absolutely love doing it, despite the somewhat taboo or challenging nature of the topic of betrayal and infidelity and affairs and all of the things that go with that. And of course, it brings a lot of emotions for a lot of people. In terms of my story, well, I kind of I've spent most of my life not really knowing what it was I wanted to do with my life, and most
Hmm.
of my adult life like that as well. And often when we're in those situations, we tend to look externally. When I was at school, looking at what my peers and friends were doing in terms of what they wanted to do with their lives and whether they were going to go to university or go into employed work or whatever it was. And I remember finding like, I feel like I didn't have the answers. It's like I felt like I should know what I should want to do, what I want from my life. And the reality was I just didn't. Um, so I got a job in hospitality, and I worked in hospitality on and off for about 16 years. I also did a variety of other jobs part-time in all kinds of industries, in the motor trade. I've always been very good with my hands, and often fabrication and working and manufacturing and just all kinds of things. But all that aside, I've always had like a deep fascination for human psychology, why people do the things they do. I've always been very introspective myself as an individual, paying sort of close attention to my own thoughts and feelings, and just trying to get a clearer understanding about what motivates me and how that relates to the people and other people in my life. Throughout my sort of chopping and changing of jobs, I in the meantime, in my personal life, I met my wife
Mhm.
and we got married in 2012, and then had proceeded to have a couple of children, a boy and a girl, and we were happily married at running up to sort of not long before, I suppose, the COVID pandemic, probably a year or so before that. We'd been married for about 8 years nearly, and I'd had some suspicion that something just wasn't quite right in the relationship. I wasn't really sure what. I sort of really felt quite happy in my relationship and very fulfilled. We both worked full time. We got 2 young kids, and life was challenging, of course, but not so much so that I thought it was wrong or there was anything out of kilter up until that point. And then I started to notice some slight behavioural changes in my wife. Just little things, nothing like stand out, nothing massive, but when you have spent a long period of time with somebody very close to you, them,
Right.
even the tiniest behavioral changes start to magnify themselves, and they become very apparent in the moment. So again, trying to sort of condense this story a little bit, it ended up that my wife had started to form an emotional relationship, an emotional affair with one of my close friends, and ultimately that ended up in us separating and divorcing. My original hope was to try and save the marriage. I didn't want to just walk away from it. It's not what I signed up for. But of course, although that was true, I did want to save the relationship. I wasn't prepared to do it blindly. If we were going to try and stay married, it really needed to be because it was something that we both wanted, not just because of the children, not just because of finances, not because of the house, not because of logistics. Like, it needed to be stripped of all of those things. And it's like, what do we want? Is it something that we want? Is it something she still wants? And ultimately, that wasn't something that she could, comply with, I suppose. It seemed at that moment in time that is not what she wanted. And so we did go down the route of separation and divorce. And then she remained in the relationship with the affair partner. I moved out of the family home because that was the most logical thing to do for a combination of reasons. And as challenging as that was, it did offer me some clear separation in terms of being able to sort of, I suppose, in some way compartmentalize the situation from afar, rather than being sort of under the same roof trying to deal with all the emotional challenges that were faced. Of course, that brought its own set of challenges with the affair partner becoming more integrated with my children, which was a very challenging time for me to go through, to try and sort of comprehend and justify. And my children would come and stay with me, and it'd be like, oh yeah, he's bought us an ice cream this weekend, or we went to the park, or and that was a very, very difficult time. And I think that would have been challenging no matter who the other guy was. But the fact that he was a close friend up until that point, and I suppose because the relationship had started with deceit and betrayal, it never really sat well. So it was something I had to work through. Fast forward a little bit further, and I'd been in my previous job. So by this point, I'd spent the first chunk of my life in predominantly hospitality, but then I moved into a small independent company in manufacturing, and I worked my way up to general manager within that company. But it was quite small, family run, and it wasn't going to be my career-ending role. I always knew that. I did get fulfillment and pleasure from it, but I knew it wasn't going to be the be-all and end-all. And I'd now got to this point where previously I thought I knew what the next 5 or 10 years looked like, and now I didn't know what tomorrow looked like. So in a lot of ways, this was initially very, very frightening. Because I just didn't know what to do. There was that uncertainty meter was like, rising high, and it was scary, and there was a lot of fear. But on the flip side, it was also a blank canvas. it meant that actually I could kind of do what I wanted. I was no longer tied by some of the restrictions that I previously had. And even though I didn't see them as restrictions, the point is I was free to make my choices. I had a completely different schedule. There was lots of different things. I wasn't tied in the same way. So I started looking at other things I wanted to do with my life. And I recognized the pain that I'd gone through. During that journey, I'd actually sort of stumbled across coaching from as a client perspective, and much of what I was learning was resonating really well with me. I was feeling quite validated by a lot of the concepts and ideas and tools that I was picking up as I was going along, and how that really reinforced and complemented much of my own healing journey, but not just that, but also many other areas of my life.
Right.
At that point, I recognized that actually this is more than just something I'm interested in. I think it's something I would actually really quite like to do, something I could be very good at. And that's what I decided to do. So I did my research. I went through a year's worth of training and became essentially a life and relationship coach. But because of my experience both with betrayal and deceit and infidelity, I then, when I set up my business, focused predominantly on working with those who have been betrayed. And that's exactly what I do now, working with people one-to-one, and helping as many people as I can. So sorry, a long, brief description.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it was long, but like I can understand the feeling. I can understand that what was going on at that time, like when you just got divorced and everything was messed up. You don't know that now what to do, what is next, what I'm going to do now. At that particular time, like the situation was very scary. Like now what? Like I don't have anything. So how do you like control yourself or overcome all those things? And now you are so confident and you are a great guy. Like now when I talk to you off camera as well, you are very much confident about what you do. You are very positive, and like you told me that nothing, like whatever happens in our life is for the good things. Like for being busy it's a good thing. I'm always very happy for all the things that is going on in my life and everything. So you are now, like when I look at you, you are a very different person. So at that particular time, like how do you manage all those things?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I've always been quite logical and rational, and I suppose maybe a problem solver. That's kind of how I've dealt with most things in life. And normally it's with conversations with other people. I'm trying to help other people through challenging situations and times. And of course, I've faced a fair few of my own in my life as well. But so at the time, obviously, there was a lot of pain. I can't pretend that there wasn't. And there was a lot of uncertainty, and it was very scary, and it felt awful. And there were lots of things happening that I didn't expect, like certain emotions that were coming up that I didn't expect. And interestingly enough, there was a lot of expectation about how I should feel from like my friends and family and people around me. I think because a bit like mental health in general, there's this stigma attached to betrayal and infidelity. And therefore, people tend to already have a preconceived idea of how they would deal with that situation should they be faced with it. The reality is, for many of these things in life, it's a bit like how do you think you would react if you arrived at a road traffic accident or something. The reality is you don't know how you're going to react until you actually are faced with that situation. And that's kind of how it was for me as well. So I recognized that what the messages that were coming from afar, from around me, from my network, weren't quite aligned with what I was actually experiencing. So everybody was like trying to portray, that she was this cause for all of my pain. And, we could argue for and against that, but I should hate her. I should be very vengeful. There should maybe be a lot of blame, all those kinds of things. And that's just not how I felt at all. I still loved her. I still cared for her very much. Obviously, I was not very pleased with her choices, but I I could sort of see how it developed. So there was an element of understanding. And I think that's probably the first key.
Hmm.
When any time we're faced with something that doesn't align with our expectations, really it's like, well, just try and understand the situation a bit better. We tend to look at life through our own narrow lens, let's say. I often think of it as a bit like, imagine we'd first met and I introduced myself to you by giving you a pair of glasses that were, I don't know, had like a dark red tint on them, for example. And you put those glasses on, and now everything you see,
Hmm.
everything you judge has that red tinge to it, that red tint to it, because
Right.
that's all you can see. But however, I could take those glasses off and give you a pair of green glasses, and all of a sudden you see something very different.
Right.
And it sounds so simple, but the reality is that's kind of what we're faced with. We have this option to try on different glasses and look at the world from a different perspective. The temptation is to only look at it from your own narrow, and that's not necessarily a criticism, it's just our own lived experience, and we
Right.
only tend to see things through the lens that we choose, that makes us feel good, that's validating, that's easy. And of course, not that going through betrayal is easy, of course, it's definitely not. It's easier to follow the preconceived idea of how you should act or how you should feel or how you should react. But of course, a lot of that comes from society. So I suppose
Yeah.
I had the ability to separate the external noises
Hmm.
from what I was feeling myself. Really just trying to get a good grasp of the situation of like, well, this is what, I remember I was going through some old notebooks a few weeks ago and trying to find something, and I found one of like the journal pads that I'd written at the time, and it was literally, what are the facts I'd written at the top, and then I'd literally put like bullet points, and
Hmm.
I'd put things like, I no longer live with my wife, we are currently getting divorced, I no longer live with my children, blah blah. They were very like, and I'm really back now, and this was several years ago now, and they were very factual statements. And although I didn't really realize the utility of that at the time, to me it was just like my natural way of processing things, think about things logically.
Right.
I recognize that's something that doesn't come natural to everybody, but it was that separation of the facts, the things that I could or couldn't control from the situation, which then gave me the power to control the things that were left. So I couldn't change my wife's behavior. I couldn't change the affair partner. I couldn't change how my kids might or might not react. I couldn't change what my friends and family and parents and things were saying and their opinions. I couldn't change any of that, but I could change how I looked at the situation. And that really was the key to giving me some like self-control, because I felt like I had all the power taken away from me, and it was this opportunity that was like me taking that power back. So yeah, in getting clear on what you can and can't control makes a huge difference when faced with those challenging situations, for definite.
Makes sense. Amazing. So, Luke, like it is a great thing, like you told the audience about the classes, like the things that we are wearing, we will see the whole world at the same thing. So, like this was amazing. So, Luke, we want to understand now you are a full-time coach, you are coaching
Yes.
people for the full time,
Yep.
and you are loving your job, you are loving the things that you do. So, it is a great thing. You have a very hard struggle life, but like a lot of challenges coming up. But now at this moment, you are in a good stage, you are doing a lot of thing in your life. Now, at this present moment, like, are you alone or do you have somebody like with you?
Sure. Okay. So interesting story. We So, as you know, obviously, I separated from my wife. We got divorced.
Yeah.
We were both very keen on putting our children first in terms of making sure that we, as co-parents, did as good a job as we could. Even though there was this influence with the affair partner on her side, we still were able to like really pay attention to what was going to be right for the children when it came to our role as parents. So we maintained a very good relationship in that sense anyway, and that was something that was important to me, and it was something that was important to her. Then about a year after, their relationship did actually come to an end, and I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a relief. Excuse me. Not because of my relationship with her, but because of the kids. Again, it was that, like I mentioned before, having to deal with him, gradually becoming more integrated in their lives was something that was certainly very difficult, and something I would have dealt with ongoing, but I definitely did not want to. So that was a bit of a relief. And then, next couple of years or so, just going through our normal lives. I did some dating, and with varying levels of success, but didn't find any happy ever after. And eventually we ended up, we were sat having lunch after we'd been out with the kids one day, and so I made this passing comment of, well, if we're still single in 3 months, should we go on a date? And she sort of like looked at me, and we both sort of like laughed a little bit. And anyway, that's basically what happened. So sure enough, 3 months or thereabouts later, we were both still single. And so we thought, well, why not? The same rules still applied. So those ground rules that I had, those boundaries that I'd set when I discovered the affair was happening, they were pretty clear. It has to be for the right reasons. Obviously, he would have to be removed from our life, but by this point, he already was. She would have to want the relationship. It wasn't just convenience. It wasn't just because it was easy. It wasn't because of our history. It wasn't because of any of those things. It was because we had both changed as individuals. She'd learned a lot about herself in that same time period. And of course, obviously, I'd also learned a lot about myself and been able to reflect on many things. And although I think I was a pretty good husband, I was still able to reflect on areas that I, given another chance, maybe would have done slightly differently.
Yeah.
And really sort of taken responsibility for that. And I think she did the same as well. So we essentially trialed a relationship for 3 months or so, and just did it completely in secret. Kids, nobody knew, and we would just spend some time together when the kids had gone to bed, and and things like that. And then at regular points, just keep checking in terms of like, are our wants, are the things that we want going forward still aligned? For example, obviously we don't live together, and so that's a question that we still explore even now. It's like we have been back together now for a year and a half or thereabouts, and the relationship's very good, but it's very, very different as well. I never imagined that I'd be in a committed long-term relationship, certainly with the mother of my children, and not live together. That's never something I pictured in my life. But actually, it's kind of perfect, because it means that our time together is very intentional. Our time with the kids is very intentional. But also, it means that we also get our true separate time, like completely separate. It's been a good place for me to be able to, embark and build and grow my business. And there's been lots of positives. But I think, like anything, and it is a bit like we were talking about just before we came on, you can look at any given situation and you have a choice. We always have a choice.
Right.
Sometimes we're faced with situations and circumstances that are undesirable, let's say. But you can either resist that, you can avoid the emotions, you can ignore the emotions, you can try and compartmentalize them, you can run away from it, you can get angry, you can react, you can kick up a fuss, or you can just embrace that discomfort and really focus on what it is that you can get from that situation. How could I use this to my advantage? How could this be an opportunity? And I think there's been a handful of significant things. I went through bankruptcy. I was made redundant, where I lost my job. I was then in hospital for 5 weeks, and came very, very close to, probably closer to losing my life than I'd realized at the time. I've been through betrayal and infidelity and divorce, and there's all of these different things which at any given point I could have gone a very different route. And I know of people friends and people that I've met throughout my life who have taken very different routes, and they don't end well sometimes. And that's just not how I choose to live my life. And the more people I can help recognize that they also have a choice, then
Right.
the better. Because I think that's the thing. I think people get stuck in these situations. They feel like all of the power is with the other person or the situation or their boss or the government or politics or whatever it is, when really you always have a choice. Always.
100%. 100%. We always have a choice. And I can see that you are very, like, you have a purpose in your life. You are very, like, strong related to your purpose and related to what you want to do in your life. Because now, like, you have lot of challenges and lot of things going on. If you don't have any purpose or anything, then usually most of the people got distracted, like they go here and there and that and that. But you are very, very focused related to your career or what you want to do in your life or something like
Yeah,
that.
but I think it's worth pointing out, though, that even though that is true, I am very focused and I am very driven. And I do try and look at it's not about just about positive thinking. I don't think that's necessarily
Yeah.
useful in its own right, but it's as much about dealing with the challenging times and
Right.
acknowledging
Right.
those, embracing that. I have a very positive outlook on life, and I try to find things that help me move forward rather than things that hold me back. It doesn't mean there aren't lots of things that are still challenging. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I don't face the same challenges or similar challenges, because at the end of the day, you don't know what comes tomorrow. And I've experienced that so many times in my life. 3 months before I went bankrupt, I had no idea that
three
that's what
months
was going to
before
happen. 3 months before I went bankrupt, I did not know that that was going to be the outcome. It happened in a relatively short space of time.
how do you
And
look at problems? Like, the way you look at problems is very different from others. Like, 3 months before you were bankrupt and right now you are so confident. So, like, how do you look at the problems?
yeah, sure. Just so I wasn't sorry. Just to clarify on that,
Yeah.
so I was bankrupt about 15 years ago,
Yeah.
but but I only realised that that was going to be the outcome 3 months prior to it. So not been bankrupt recently, but in terms of like anything that happens suddenly,
Hmm.
or even in a relatively short space of time, again, you have a choice. It's either you recognize, well, this is my approach at least. My approach is, okay, well, this is a problem,
Yeah.
and therefore I want to try and do what I can to solve it. And I sometimes think it's easier to analyze when we think about somebody that we care about. So maybe your friend has come to you and they've got the problem. It's like, well, how would you approach that? Well, a couple
Right.
of things you do. One thing you might do is you might listen to them. You might just offer them space and allow them to just get all of their thoughts, feelings, emotions, get it all out in whatever is the most comfortable way for them. So that can
Yeah.
definitely help. But of course, we can do that for ourselves too. But then again, it's just looking at it. It's like, well, okay, this is the problem. What are the possible solutions? So I think when it comes to facing challenges that you perhaps weren't expecting, one of the most effective things that I've certainly found is to consider it like you're trying to help one of your closest friends. And
Mm.
if a friend comes to you, they have a problem, well, what do? Well, the first thing you do is you listen and you
Right.
just hear that problem out and you get a better understanding of it. Now, it's likely that your friend is probably only looking at the situation in a very black and white way. Either I do it or I don't do it, or I make
Mm.
this decision or I make that decision. It's a yes or a no. It's a very binary type process. And that's
Right.
something that we all experience when we're driven by emotion. We get fearful of making the wrong decision half the time. But the reality is, there's often nearly always more than one decision. There's often multiple decisions. So if you're there as a friend trying to help that person, then you're going to try and offer different perspectives. You're going to try and offer them different solutions. Well, have you thought about this? What about if you do it this way? How about if you do it this way? What if you approach this person in this particular method? And you're coming up with these like brainstorming ideas almost to try and help that person just shift their mindset, because at the minute they're trapped.
Mm.
So I think most people have experienced that, at least to some extent in their life. Well, if you can do it with your friend and if you can do it with other people, then you are equally capable of doing it with yourself. So treat yourself like somebody you really care about. Treat yourself like you would treat your best friend. And many people don't do this. Maybe they've brought up thinking that they're not worthy enough. They've got low self-worth and they feel that they're not as important as the other person. Well, I can guarantee you that that is not true. And we
Yeah.
know that by the message that we get told every time we get onto an airplane. If we are in a worst case scenario and those little face masks come down, well, what's the number one rule? You put your mask on first, because you can't help anybody if you haven't looked after yourself first. And the same is
100%.
true. Yeah, the same is true in all areas. So I think just recognizing that
Yeah.
you first, then everybody else. And that's not
Yeah.
selfish, because you can only help people if you
When
are in
you're
a position to help them.
right, 100% for sure. Luke, just one thing I want to know from
Yeah,
you.
sure.
Now, at this time, like everything is going well. Now you are a coach. Now what? What is your purpose for your life? Now, what you want to do? What is the future goal that you have?
Yeah, so there's several, I suppose. Of course, I'm trying to build my business, and there's a combination of motivations behind that. One is that I would like to be successful in my business, whatever that looks like. Now, that could be monetary, it could be through the ability to help a larger number of people.
Mm,
Ultimately, I want to try and help people recognize that they have choice and they have control in their life. And even when
right,
something as devastating as betrayal comes their way, they can overcome that. And not only can they overcome it, but they can use that as the catalyst for something so much more. Separate to that, of course, I still have 2 children and I love them very much. And I endeavor to continue to be a role model to an extent, but ultimately just supportive in whatever that they want to do, to try and offer them some of the tools that I've learned as an adult that I didn't have, or the availability to, or was aware of when I was young. And of course, I can't control what they do with that, but I can be there for them should they need it.
right,
And yeah, ultimately, I think just about being appreciative of every moment, and just knowing it sounds a bit cliche. Maybe it is a bit cliche, but it's also very true that the only time that counts is right now, like literally this
mm,
second,
this
and now
second.
this second, and now this second. It's like anything in the future is imagined, and we've got no idea whether it's going to go that way. And everything in the past, well, it's already happened, and there's nothing we can do about it. Plus, it really depends how we interpret that version of the past.
Right,
2 people can tell the same story and actually have a very different interpretation of it. So the only thing that really is, you think about everything we do is because of how we think it's going to make us feel ultimately. So if we deduct that further, everything is about feeling. Everything. In this
mm,
conversation, there's feelings in our body, there's like excitement, there's interest, there's intrigue. As people are listening, they're like, oh, has this guy got something interesting to say, or has he not? And they're either going to be more drawn towards it or maybe more detracted from it. It's their emotion that's ultimately driving every single action. And that is only ever experienced live, on the spot, in the moment. So just enjoy it.
amazing, amazing. Luke, this was amazing. This session was amazing. We got to know about your story, about a lot of things. So this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you
Very
so much
welcome.
for being present in our podcast. And guys who are watching this video, like I know you are inspired by the story, you are inspired by Luke. So definitely make sure to connect with him and his social media. So I'm going to share the link of your social media in the description. If you have a website or something, I can also share the link of that as well in the
Sure, yeah.
description, so that people can connect with you. If you have any doubts or something, you can just type it down in the comment section. We are definitely going to reply that as well. So Luke, thank you so much for being in this show once again.
You're absolutely welcome. And thank you very, very much for having me. And like I say, yes, I'll share the details to put in the description.
Yeah,
If anybody is struggling with betrayal in particular,
yeah,
and they're having problems in their relationship when it comes to infidelity, even if you don't want to reach out directly, I am also the host of the After the Affair podcast,
hmm,
which has got many, many hours of me giving you useful tips and advice on how to heal from betrayal. So
amazing. I'm also going to link it down in the description.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luke. Thank you so much, guys. Bye bye. See you in the next podcast.